Ray Cronin from Club Benchmarking is here. Mr. Cronin came in right before COVID. I think we were his last trip before quarantine to give the board orientation. A little bit about him and his background is on the screen. He's going to talk about the industry and where Hillcrest fits in terms of the industry, in terms of our capitalization, and some of the things that we're doing here, and the reinvestment into the club, and then talk specifically about where Hillcrest can go with a mindset of owners. So I'd like to welcome Mr. Cronin.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Won't take long to figure out I'm not from Boise. I'm from Boston. I do this. This is all I do. I left Boston last Tuesday, a week ago today, and I've been in 6 clubs since I left. In Philadelphia, Raleigh, North Carolina, Atlanta, Georgia. I was in Wichita, Kansas last night, at Wichita Country Club, and then Boise tonight and tomorrow. And I started this company 12 years ago when I became a member, not actually of the board, I got the idea for the business when I became a member of the Greens Committee on my club. I belong to a club 20 miles south of Boston. It was founded in 1900. It's a golf-only club. I love my club. It's literally one of the best golf clubs in the world in terms of golf capability. It's a small club. It was founded in 1900 with a clubhouse and 18 holes of golf. And it's 2020. We have a clubhouse and 18 holes of golf. We haven't expanded one iota in 120 years. You couldn't have predicted it in March. In my last presentation before we locked down and the pandemic was here, I think it was like March 9th or 10th. You couldn't have predicted that golf would have been a beneficiary of the pandemic. It's kind of ironic. But before the pandemic, and I don't know how long it will persist, the clubs that were having the most difficulty in the industry were the golf-only or the golf-centric clubs. They were the clubs that had the need for more members and had the lowest initiation fees. They were the clubs that struggle. Every year there's private member-owned clubs that close. I know of 8 that have closed in 2020. When they close, we have data from over 1,000 clubs in our database that we gather every year, which I'm going to get into in some detail. But when a club closes, I kind of go, look, if it's a private member-owned club, even if we don't have the data, there's a way to access the data because most private member-owned clubs are not-for-profit, as you know, and not-for-profit tax returns have to be filed publicly. So there's a way you can actually go in and look at their financial data. Every one of the clubs that I've looked at that's closed this year, and it's been happening for the 12 years that we've had the company. There's a theme that runs through all of them. And the theme is this. There's 2 ledgers in every club, the operating ledger and the capital ledger. The operating ledger is the money it's most of the money that we fork over to belong to a private club. It's the monthly dues. Most of the money runs through the operating ledger in a club. But most clubs don't have financial issues on the operating ledger. They have financial issues on the capital ledger. And the clubs that end up closing their doors or having to sell to someone like Concert Golf, as Ty said, are the clubs that are having trouble on the capital ledger. And the way it is in 2020, in this kind of day and age, 75% of the clubs in the industry are undercapitalized. Hillcrest is one of the 75%. My club is one of the 75%. The fundamental question is, how significant is the undercapitalization? That's what we're going to talk about tonight. But clubs get themselves into jams due to a lack of capital. And capital in private member-owned clubs can only come from one place. And that place is from the owners of the club who are the members of the club. They either contributed as they belong or they contributed up front as an initiation fee, or both. Ideally, both. If we don't have enough capital in the club, what happens is the asset, your point on the hotels and, every 7-year refresh, I spend, 150 nights a year in a hotel. I joke, there's a ratio, I don't have it in the presentation, but there's a ratio we discovered that can measure how depreciated the assets, whether it's a hotel or a club or whatever. So for me, it's a game now. When I pull into a hotel and I walk in the door, I'm like putting them in a bucket of where they are in the capital, spectrum in terms of, do they look like they're updated and fresh? Or do they look like they're old and depleted and depreciated? I do the same thing in clubs. You can tell, I can literally tell. I've done this, what we're doing tonight, whether it's the board or the committee or some subset of the members like tonight. I've been in over 500 clubs doing presentations like this to 500 different groups of members. And the theme is very similar. The questions are very similar. They're frankly almost identical. In addition to that, after I had the idea for the business when I was on the Greens committee of my club, I spent 10 years, I still think about it and shake my head, and I don't know how I did it, frankly, but I was on the board of our club for 10 consecutive years. I'd like to joke and say I'm 40 years old, but this is what 10 consecutive years on your club's board will do to you. I was on the board for 10, and the last 3, I was president. Our club had really fallen behind in terms of capital. And it wasn't just me, but I call it a group of progressive members. And by progressive there, I mean it in the right way. I mean a group of members seeking change and trying to update the capital assets. We just kind of decided we have to do this, and I really feel if we didn't do it, we'd probably run a path to, not being relevant anymore. And the way we had to do it, and the way every club has to do it, including Hillcrest, is to get more capital from the members. There is no other way. You can't have weddings and generate capital. You can't sell enough hamburgers to generate the capital that is necessary. It really has to ultimately come, like in any business, if a business needs capital, it's coming from one of 2 sources. It's coming from the owners of the business or a bank. That's where you get capital. And it's true in clubs. So with that as a backdrop, the industry, and this is all data driven, the industry sorts itself very organically into 3 buckets, what we call the red, yellow, and green bucket clubs. I'll give you the headline really quick. Hillcrest is a little bit schizophrenic right now. Your balance sheet makes you look like a red bucket club, which I'm going to show that data. But you have a waiting list. Most of the clubs that have a waiting list are green bucket clubs, which is a testament to what's going on, I think, recently, that you've had the ability to draw in. And I heard earlier, I know Boise, as you said, is a growing city. A lot of people moving from California into Boise. When I was here in March, by the way, I stayed at the Fairfield Inn over by I'm a Marriott person. I stayed at the Fairfield Inn over by the airport. So when I drove here, I drove through this neighborhood. When I came in, I met maps, and I'm like, what's going on here? Because every 3rd or 4th house was people building the house there and that. Oh, that's all the people moving from California, which you all know. But that quarter of the industry, those green bucket clubs, about a quarter of the industry has a waiting list. They also have very strong balance sheets. And they have strong balance sheets. The source of strength of the balance sheet in a private club goes very much to how much the members have contributed capital over the years of the existence of the club. So those clubs tend to have a waiting list because they've had adequate capital investment, which means they have fresh and up-to-date amenities and services and facilities. That's a magnet for bringing members in, and that's why I have a waiting list. The red bucket clubs, the members' equity if you think of the equity portion of any balance sheet, whether it's a club or a business, obviously we need it to grow over time. Half of the clubs in the industry, if you consider inflation, are worth less today than they were in 2006, before the last economic meltdown. One of those clubs is Hillcrest. You're in the half of the industry that is shrinking from an equity standpoint. And what that is an indicator of not enough capital being contributed over time. And we're going to get into that in detail. We go to the next slide. There's 5 things. I'm not going to read every word of these, but this is all what we've learned. Frankly, I work my tail off. I do love what I do. We started the company. I didn't kind of expect it to turn out the way it has. That's what happens with startups. But I got the idea for the business when I was in the Greens Committee meeting. I'll just tell you a quick story because it's relevant. So there's 5 of us on the Greens Committee, and we're in the room with the superintendent, and it's in November. It was like 2007. And we were discussing the budget for maintaining the golf course for the upcoming year. And 2 of the 5 of us got into an argument. 2 strong-willed people. One thinks we spend too much maintaining the golf course. The other one thinks we spend too little. And I watched a tennis match for 20 minutes. I came out of high tech. I have an engineering degree and an MBA. I'm a numbers guy. I'll admit it. I was trained in my background that if we're making decisions, we should use data to make decisions. So after 20 minutes, I said, "May I ask a question, please?" And one of the guys goes, "Gruff, very gruff. What?" I said, "How would you know? I have no idea. How would I know whether we're spending too much or too little maintaining the golf course?" One guy owns a steel fabrication company. The other guy has a huge carpet business, both very successful. The guy who owns the carpet business says, "Well, I got a buddy on the board of Walpole. Walpole's a very similar club 7 miles away as the crow flies." He said, "That's great. What's Walpole spend?" He goes, "I don't know how much. I just know it's more." And I literally had an epiphany at that instant, which is the company. Because, my name's Cronin. I'm from Boston. I love to play golf. I'm an avid golfer. And if I'm not playing golf and I'm not traveling, I love to hang out in the grill room and drink beer. I'll admit it. But if you hang out in the grill room with a private club, I don't care where it is, long enough, you're going to hear a lot of opinions about what's going on at the club. But there's very little data, or there was very little data. I did research and found out there really is no data to help member-owned clubs use data to make better decisions. So that was the genesis for the company. Everything I'm going to talk about tonight is a result of us gathering data from about 1,000 clubs for the last 10 or 11 years and studying the heck out of it. I literally learned something every single day. These are the 5 things. The operating ledger, which is most of the money, is not the financial driver of a club. It took us 7 years to figure that out. Seems obvious to me with hindsight. The operating ledger, where we pay our monthly dues, the $600, $500, $600, $700 a month in operating dues, is the money. That money's consumed. It's consumed year in and year out. Keeping the grass green, keeping the greens cut short, keeping the beer and wine cold, and keeping the food on the table, and keeping the place clean and respected. It doesn't produce a financial outcome. 90% of the clubs in the industry set the operating ledger to break even, excluding depreciation. It's not a financial driver. Point 2, the financial driver is the capital ledger. It's capital income and capital investment, or lack thereof, that determine over time the health of a club from a financial perspective. And the problem with the industry is 3/4 of the clubs in the industry are not generating adequate capital income. The third point, there's a metric, which I'm going to show you in a moment for Hillcrest. There's a metric. We all know the metric. It's net worth, whether we're financially oriented or not. We understand what net worth is. Every family, every organization, every business has to have its net worth grow year after year, otherwise we're going backwards. Okay? half of the clubs in the industry, as I said earlier, the net worth is less today. That's equity on the balance sheet. They're worth less today on paper than they were in 2006, which is a reflection of inadequate capital. Point 4, the key to success, which is what the team, Ty, Dave, Max, what the team's done, Caleb and Shane. By the way, I talk to folks that do this stuff all day long. We have a team that is superb. I'm quite confident of that. But we changed the company 5 years ago when I realized how important capital was. We began to help clubs plan the capital future. That's what we're trying to help Hillcrest do. We're trying to ensure that you have adequate capital to meet your capital needs, to reduce your debt, and to one gentleman's point, if you want to put new greens in with some kind of new grass, that you have adequate capital to make that decision. So it's the capital plan that's the key to sustainable financial outcomes at clubs. And then the final point, it's a hard one it's counterintuitive, I grant it, but it is what it is. The data shows it very clearly. The clubs that are in the biggest trouble, the red bucket clubs, are the clubs with the lowest dues and the lowest initiation fees. The green bucket clubs are the clubs with the highest dues and the highest initiation fees. Clubs compete on value, not price. Now, that doesn't mean every club should double its dues, but it does mean when we're making decisions as owners, because we are owners, if we're trying to make a decision on the margin, the economic concept of on the margin, when we can either lean towards marginally increasing what we contribute to the club and having a better experience, or lean the other way and not contribute that and the experience declines. The right answer, the data shows very clearly, is to lean towards the member experience. Before this meeting, frankly, I had to use the restroom. I went to the restroom and I opened that door. I saw a lot of people in there. I thought there was like a little mini convention going on or something. So I was curious. I'm a curious person. I opened the door and went in. You have 3 simulators. One simulator had 4 gentlemen playing Kapalua, Bettany. I played there on my honeymoon years ago, drinking a couple of beers. The next simulator had 4 young ladies playing. I'm guessing the average age of those 8 people, I don't know if they were couples and they just broke up. I'm going to guess the average age was somewhere around 33 or 4. To me, with all the clubs I visit, it just warmed my heart. I'm like, this is so good. This is what clubs should be about. They're having a ball on a Wednesday night, not even Thursday. It's tremendous. That's the value. That's the value that brings people in and keeps people in. Your membership churn a couple of years ago was 13%. The median for the industry is 6. You're at 6 now. So something's changed in the dynamic to decrease the churn. That's a really important point, as Max pointed out. Look, there's a lot of numbers on the chart. I'm not going to get into the numbers. This is coming from someone who is literally, I love golf. I am an avid golfer. I can't explain how much I love it. I read golf course architecture books. I read golf course history. The golf history, I just love the game. But the data shows clearly that yellow pie slice on this chart. The pie slices in this chart represent the fixed operating expenses of a club. The yellow pie slice is the money that's allocated to non-golf sports, okay? And as that pie slice grows, so does the member count of the club, so does the initiation fee of the club, and oh, by the way, so does the amount of money we have available per 18-hole equivalent to maintain the golf course. And the reason is, with a broad set of services and amenities, more people are compelled to join. At my club, this lovely club that I love, the only people who join the golf is because we only have golf in a clubhouse. You at least have other amenities and services, but the future for every club, Hillcrest included, is broadening the services and amenities. One of the most significant investments that's occurred in the last 10 years in the green bucket clubs is this. These are the investments. resort style pools, fitness and wellness, and casual dining, including outdoor dining. I'm not gonna get into the debate whether you should or shouldn't have outdoor dining. I'm just gonna tell you the clubs that have done it have positive outcomes from doing it, okay? Casual dining, you walk into clubhouses, I walk into clubhouses all the time, as I said. I walk into some and literally, I'm not exaggerating, I feel like I just walked onto a 1970s TV set. I walk into others, and I think I just walked into the hottest, most fun, upscale pub in whatever the heck city I'm in. TVs everywhere, people having a ball, casual dress, popcorn machines. Then in the next room, there's kids running around playing laser tag. The contrast is stark. Which clubs do you think is succeeding? The ones that have resort-style pools, the ones that have pools that look like a bathtub ×4. The ones that have 1970s dining are the ones that look like they were built yesterday. The ones that don't have fitness and wellness are the ones that do. Which clubs do you think are thriving? The data is clear as a bell. This slide, this chart on the left shows Hillcrest for your last fiscal year. Your yellow pie slice, that 6%, puts you in the third column, and there's 7 columns on that chart. You, as you say in your mission statement, are a golf-centric club. That's okay. But part of the reason that you have capital stress, and you do have capital stress, which we're going to show you in a minute, is because of that golf centricity, which is the point of the previous slide. Now, this is a tough thing. I have to live with it in my own club. There's people at my club that literally won't talk to me. You know why? Because when I was president, we raised the monthly capital dues from $40 to $120. And you know why we did that? Because we have an irrigation system that was installed in 1964 that had geysers coming up out of the fairway once or twice a year. I saw one of it happen. I don't know if you've ever seen that happen. It's something to see. And we could put the irrigation system in. We started in 2015. That's when we increased the capital dues. We put the irrigation system in last fall and this spring. Golf course was as good as it's been in the 22 years I've been a member. Part of your capital issue relates directly to that golf centricity. I'm not telling you what to do, I'm just telling you what the data says. Next slide, please. This shows the churn that Max had mentioned earlier, and it also shows the sources of capital. The average club is on the right, Hillcrest is on the left. If you just look up for the 10 years we've been studying the data in the 1,000 or so clubs, and you just kind of boil it down to its essence, clubs raise capital equally. It changes year to year because some clubs have capital assessments, as you're potentially having. A very modest one, by the way. Most capital assessments are 8, 10, 12, some 20 grand. But if you look over the 10-year period and you look year to year, the sources of capital are 3. Initiation fee income, capital dues that recur, like the $53 a month, the debt service fee, and capital assessments that come and go. And the distribution over that 10-year period is about equal. It's about a third, a third, a third. Okay? And I don't want to sound contradictory here, but we are working hard to get clubs off of assessments. Assessments are indicative of, in our opinion, but I get what you're trying to do to put this new amenity in, which I think, frankly, is the right decision. But we're trying to get clubs to plan for the capital future. That's what we're working with Hillcrest on. So that if you want to redo your greens, you have the money to redo your greens. Otherwise, we always kick the can down the road. Can you imagine a golf-only club, an irrigation system that has a typical useful life of somewhere between 20 and 30 years? Can you imagine a golf-only club that has an irrigation system that was 60 years old? We should have been putting a third one in. We were only putting the second one in. It's a common issue. Okay. This chart That blue line shows for 700 clubs, the compounded annual growth rate of the members' equity or net worth, the equity portion of the balance sheet, since 2006. We wanted to go to 2006 because I wanted to see what the impact of the last economic recession was on clubs, and it was profound. There's a club that we use as our benchmark, and when I said earlier, resort-style pools, casual dining, outdoor dining, fitness and wellness, I actually had that club in mind. I always have this club in mind. It's called Carmel Country Club. It's in Charlotte, North Carolina, and they've invested aggressively since about 2004. And their members' equity has grown at a compounded annual growth rate of almost 8% since that time. The median for the industry is 2.3%, which is below the rate of construction inflation. And the reason I use construction inflation is because capital is related to building, and building has had an inflation that's higher than the core cost of living over the last 15 years. So the rate of construction, and this is according to Turner Construction, they keep a quarterly index and have been doing so for about 30 years. Since 2006, the construction inflation nationally was 3.3%. The median club's net worth or equity has grown at 2.3%. Hillcrest has shrunk at 0.5%. So your members' equity, forget inflation, in real dollars, your members' equity was worth less at the end of 19 than it was at the end of 06. Next slide, please. That's your members' equity. Compared to Carmel, they let us use theirs as a best-in-class benchmark. That's Hillcrest. The reason, back to the point I made at the outset, the reason that your members' equity has declined is inadequate capital income. The operating ledger, you've actually made money in your operating ledger, is contributing to capital, okay? But you don't have enough capital to overcome the depreciation expense. They said 90% of the clubs in the country set the operating ledger to break even, excluding depreciation. So the net worth or equity of the club will only grow if there's enough capital income to overcome the depreciation expense. If there isn't, net worth goes down. That's what's been happening at Hillcrest. Members' equity is a leading indicator of a club's ability to meet its future capital needs. You need more capital. That's what your team, both the voluntary leadership and the full paid professionals, that's the message that they are trying to communicate to the membership. Next slide, please. It took 7 years because, we did what the industry does. We focused on the operating ledger when we started the company. And I was walking out of a club in Florida about 5 years ago after doing a presentation to 350 members. It was about 9 o'clock at night. My usual routine is find a pub, have a burger or a salad and a couple of beers and go back to the hotel and go to sleep. That night I skipped it, which means something was important because I just left a club that had invested $6.5 million in a banquet facility, with the business case being, if we do this, we'll make so much money in food and beverage, we'll never have to raise dues again. How do you think that worked out? Not so well. There was 350 members in the room that night, and I don't think one of them was happy. I was like the doctor, and I am like a doctor, with an MRI. The MRI is the MRI. I'm just trying to communicate what it says, but hopefully with a good bedside manner. It didn't tell a good tale of that club. But it got me to thinking as I was leaving, if you make a $6.5 million investment in a capital in a banquet facility, what happens to your depreciation expense? How much capital income does a banquet facility generate in a private club? So my thought was their net worth must be going down, and it was. And that was the first net worth that we got. Now we've gotten it from 2006 from over 700 clubs, including yours. The average club ends up 70% equity, 30% liabilities. Most liabilities in a club are bank debt, okay? Hillcrest, I'm rounding, is 60% liabilities, 40% members' equity. Now, one of the really difficult topics, I can say this firsthand from my own experience at my club. Governing a club or being a member of a club, in my mind, and this is why I love golf. I love golf because golf is a mirror of life to me. I played hockey all my life. I love sports, but golf made me no sport ever resonated with me as much as golf when I really started playing it. And it resonates with me because of the lessons that we learn. And one of the hardest lessons to learn is, playing golf is if you three-jack the fifth green from 6 feet for a bogey, the hardest thing to do is get to the sixth tee and forget about it, right? And if you don't forget about it, you have a lousy run. It's the same in governing clubs. What happened in the past isn't the issue. What happened in the past is the reason we are where we are today. The issue is, what are we doing about the future? And in private clubs, it gets a little bit tough because it can be personal. So even when we put the irrigation system on the table, so to speak, at my club in 2015, there was some emotion and tension, I'll admit it. But I was the president with past presidents. It's almost like, hey, don't say we didn't do that. Whatever. I don't even really want to get into it, but you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm trying to say? It doesn't matter what the hell happened in the past. What matters is what we're going to do about the future. Just like golf. Your balance sheet, looking at it today in 2020, October of 2020, and thinking about it for the next 5 or 10 years, it needs work. You can see it right here. You have a debt to equity ratio of 116%. By the way, that's different than the measures that Dave and Ty put up. They use liabilities to assets, which is fine. We use third-party debt to equity. I don't have to get into the details as to why, but there's a reason why we do it that way. So that's just your third-party debt, your bank debt. 116% versus 20% average. If you look to the other side of the balance sheet, this is the critical issue. You can't get a simpler balance sheet for those that like finance than a private member-owned club's balance sheet. 80% of the assets end up on one line item. And that line item is the net book value of property, plant, and equipment, which means the assets that we have after it's accumulated depreciation. And if you look to the right of the balance sheet, and you think about the money flowing through a balance sheet, the money to fund the property, plant, and equipment comes from the members' equity. The money that flows through the operating ledger year after year after year is essentially gone. The financial persistence is members contributing capital to keep their property, plant, and equipment fresh and up to date and not letting it get stale, like some of the hotels we've all stayed in where they haven't done a refresh in 20 years. Hillcrest balance sheet is indicative, and this is the MRI discussion, trying to do a good bedside manner. I don't care what happened in the past. I just know what you're going to do with the balance sheet in the future. And it's screaming at me, and I'm screaming at you, because I'm trying to help, saying you need more members' equity, more capital. Does anyone, with all serious, please, it's like we used to say in my fraternity at the end of the monthly fraternity meeting, speak now or forever hold your peace. I think that's appropriate in clubs. Does anyone see anything on that balance sheet that would controvert what I just said? Does anyone think that that balance sheet probably isn't saying that we need more capital from our owners? That's the fundamental issue. Next slide, please.
Ray, you said your questions.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, please.
You talked about what's your perspective of the liquidity situation within Hillcrest at this point in time. Are we continuing to spend and not get ahead of the?
It's a great question, and I would suggest that what the board, finance committee, and staff are putting on the table is the answer to that question. I think what the thought is to get ahead of it so that you're beginning to plan today for future capital needs by beginning to aggregate more capital today through the assessment and through the increase from 53 to 75, and then I think it's $5 a year thereafter. It's very modest, frankly. We're not talking about, look, I had 2 kids in college when I started this company. I had to live for 4 years without income. Money was very tight, a lot of stress. I'm not trying to sneeze at $2,000 or $25 a month. I'm not. On the flip side of the coin, anyone who looks in the mirror and says, hey, is this a big deal financially, can also probably say, did I go on vacation the last year or 2? Do I go out to dinner in the city of Boise where you can get some great meals and some great wine? Do I go out to dinner and spend some money in restaurants? You know, it is what it is. The money is necessary. It's not easy, I get it, but it's necessary. And it's necessary to avoid this. This is what happened. This is not our club. This is one of the most well-known clubs in the country. I was there 3 weeks ago. And it's very reminiscent of Hillcrest. What happens, and it happens in all sorts of clubs. It's not critique. It's just the way it's been. And we have the data to hopefully help change it in the future. But when we use debt to make investments, what tends to happen is we aggregate the capital necessary to pay the debt back from that investment, but we don't aggregate enough capital to pay the debt back and keep reinvesting in the asset base. So that red dot and the green dot, there's a real club. The red means a depreciated asset base. So at the end of 04, they had a very depreciated asset base. They took 15 million in debt out, invested it in the clubhouse. All of a sudden they had a green dot, which means their assets were fresh and up to date. But when they did that, the debt assessment was put forth so that they could pay the debt back, which they've done. They ended paying the debt off this month. But look what happened to their asset base since then. It slid all the way back because they were only paying the debt off. Hillcrest is in a very similar position. And the only way, it's kind of like a cycle. The only way that cycle can be broken is through capital income from the owners. There is no other way to break the cycle. And it's not a huge amount of money to break the cycle. And by the way, breaking that cycle means, frankly, and I don't want to try and sell the patio project. That's probably not my duty, but I want to say this. One of the biggest problems in the industry, the reason half of the clubs in the country, again, are worth less today than 2006, there's one reason in my mind. And the word begins with I. Anyone want to take a stab at what word I have in my mind? It's a word that is massively pervasive in 2020. You can't survive in any business in 2020 without this one word that begins with an I. What was it? Info's a good one. Oh, income. That's true too. We need that. Innovation. Innovation. We get so stuck in our ways in clubs. I didn't point to it, but the red, yellow, and green buckets. Above the red bucket, I said, those are the clubs that shun change. Above the green bucket, I said, those are the clubs that embrace change. They're dynamic. They're constantly evolving. And in the yellow bucket, they evolve more slowly. We need to be more innovative. We need to take some risks. We need to try things. The one thing I've observed in my travels is, and this happens with fitness centers and clubs constantly. You can talk to I talk to a lot of people who design fitness centers. When they design the fitness center and they put the first fitness center on the table for a club that didn't have it, they put it in at 7,000 or 8,000 square feet. And then when it starts filtering out into the membership that we're going to do the fitness center, there's a proportion of the membership that says, we don't want the fitness center. We can go pay at the gym down the street. What the heck do we want a fitness center here for? And so there's a negotiation. So the negotiation ends up with not a 7,000 square foot fitness center, but a 4,000 square foot fitness center that will cost less. And then the fitness center opens, and what do you think happens? It's universal. What do you think happens? It's too small. The architects have actually begun building fitness centers so they can be expanded because they expect it to happen. That's true in casual dining. That's true in just about anything in the club. When we take the step, the thought on the front end is, we'll never use that. But the experience on the back end is, wow, that was great. Let's do it again. You know what's happened? What I realized happened in my own club? I don't know if it applies to Hillcrest or not. I have a sense in my head. But here's what happened at my club. Our club got so stagnant and stuck that we weren't used to change. And the reason I'm a villain for a chunk of the membership is because we made a lot of change in the 3 years I was president. It's not anything but change. It's just change. And if you're in a club that's dynamic or a Green Bucket club, they've been constantly changing year after year after year for 10 or 15 or 20 years. So people are used to it, the members, and they're not all used to it. They want more of it because they like it. But in the clubs that haven't changed, that first step forward comes with great angst. It's not so easy because we don't have a model to visualize the outcome from. But once we start the ball rolling, change comes easier. Does that make sense? That's a real thing that happens in the interface. Josh, I think it was Dustin. Yeah.
The capital and the investments, and from my standpoint, I don't think a lot of people are arguing that we need to further capitalize the club. But from an industry benchmarking standpoint, what's your feedback on, the involvement of the membership in deciding on the amenity and the input into the design? Susie made a very good point about it usually goes better if you have involvement or say or input into that. What's your metrics on that?
Yeah, there is a smorgasbord there. In some clubs, most clubs, there's two types of clubs. Some clubs, it is not a lot. I can't give you the exact number. The board can make the decision. Other clubs, if you spend, the most common thing is the bylaws say it's one of two ways. If the club's going to take on debt, the members have to vote for it. Or the flip side of that coin is, it might not be the debt. It says, if the club spends more than X being $1 million, typically, then the members have to vote on it in terms of capital. Well, the third part of it would be, there could be a vote if there's a capital, quote unquote, an assessment. It depends on what the bylaws say. But I will say this on the members' design input, definitely feedback. The people who are doing the design should involve, to your point, there should be some involvement with members to check things out and get some feedback before you start sinking foundations. Definitely. On the flip side of that coin, though, I believe in the tension of opposites. As we know, you can't design a horse by committee. You can't design it by committee, but you want input on it. It's up to the professionals to design ultimately with input. Okay. And I think, I don't know if we have much more. One more slide. Yeah, this is it. I think I'll end it here. And in the previous discussion, this was talked about. It was clearly touched upon because you got what you're doing here. This is just our kind of framework, a process-driven approach that was what you were all talking about earlier. So there's two types of capital required in a club. What we call obligatory, which is repair and replacing the assets that we own, and aspirational, which is expanding or adding to the asset base. So at my club, we don't have a pool right now. If we put a pool in next year, that will be aspirational. At my club, when we put the irrigation system in to replace the one that was 60 years old, that was obligatory. The problem that we have in clubs is we don't accumulate enough capital from the existing members to cover the obligatory capital. And that capital forces us to go to banks, to kicking that can down the road. We don't fund it. That's what the plan that we've worked on with Hillcrest, that your team has worked on, is to try and come up with the forward-looking plan in the next 10 years on the obligatory column in that plan that's driving what you're thinking about right now. There's $10 million of capital for the obligatory side of that ledger. 10 million, that's $1 million a year. It's a little over 5 in the first 5 years, and a little under 5 in the second 5 years. There's one aspirational, to one gentleman's point, I think it was yours, there's one aspirational project in that 10-year horizon at the moment, and that's the patio. Now the greens, redoing the greens is in the obligatory. That doesn't mean hiring Gil Hance and reshaping and making different greens. It just means redoing the greens you already own. If you were to reshape them and, bring in a new greens designer or whatever, make it bigger, that'd be aspirational. But the point is this, your forward-looking capital plan is what I would call, I get it, but it's Spartan at the moment. It's Spartan in nature. It just says we got to keep up what we own, and we're going to do this patio. And if you do the patio, I don't know how it'll work out. None of us know how it'll work out. You can't predict it. I don't care what surveys you do, don't do who you ask, you'll find out by doing it. There's a difference between clubs and businesses. At our company, we tried stuff in the last 12 years and it didn't work. So we didn't do it anymore. Once we figured out that was probably not a good idea, we stopped. But if we never did something new, I wouldn't be standing here tonight. We have to try stuff and we can't be fearful of the outcome. But if this club does what I think it's gonna do, and I believe it will do this. By the way, those simulators with the young couples, that's aspirational. Talk about a big return on investment. Small investment, I'll bet everyone in this room gets joy out of that over this winter, those simulators. But that aspirational column, I'm going to guess in 5 years, you've turned a corner and you're going to have a lot more in that ledger for the future. And maybe, I don't know, maybe the patio is the catalyst for that change. That's it. I have more. I don't have to go through more, but I'd love to see if there's questions, please, other than the ones we already had. Does it make sense? Okay.
How do you enjoy your stay in Boise?
I love Boise. And you said it, by the way. What's your name, please? Michelle, you said it. I've been in this clubhouse twice now. But the first time I walked through and saw that view, and then today I walked through and saw that view again. And look, this place is marvelous. It's fantastic. There's a town in North Conway, in New Hampshire called North Conway. I used to have a little ski and, whatever, chalet up there for about 10, 15 years. And there's a club, a golf course in the center of town. It's semi-private called North Conway Country Club. And it has the same view. It has the mountains in the background, the Mount Washington, I can't think of the mountains now. Mount Washington's in the background, which is the highest mountain in the east. In the first tee shot, just like yours, goes down into the valley, and then you play your way back up. Pretty neat. It's a beautiful place. I love Boise. I love the climate. And what every club's trying to do. Boise's a great place. As you said, Boise's booming. That Club Carmel, I'll leave it here. The Club Carmel that we cite for the compounded annual growth rate, where they did all this investment of all these different amenities. And by the way, outdoor dining is central to it, frankly. The GM I know very well because I've done a lot of work with the club. And he's a great manager. He has the gumption to lead a board. You have a manager who's also trying to lead and pull the membership forward. He's an ex-Marine. This guy ended up as a sergeant in the Marine Corps and then started into club management. Pretty good. But I said, John, his name's John. I said, John, how'd you make Carmel? How'd you do this? He's a very funny guy. He said, Ray, I don't know if it was that hard, but I'll tell you what we were trying to do. And I think we succeeded. We were trying to create a cruise ship on land. And I'll tell you, it's a cruise ship on land. And to Max's earlier point, when they started, the average member age was 63, and they brought it down by 10 years over a 10-year period, which is very hard to do. But the place is just flat out fun. And that's what you got to do at Hillcrest. You got to make this place not only a great golf place, but you got to make it so much darn fun that everyone in your lovely city is knocking on the door to get in. literally banging the door down because I want to be part of it. Sounds a little different than what we treat country clubs in the past, but that's the way the future is. The average age of people to join a country club is 42. I'm 62. What I want is very different than the 42-year-olds that are at my club that I play a lot of golf with. I love playing with the young folks. First time I played with the young folks, younger folks, they said, "Hey, Rick, you mind if we put music on?" And my first thought was, no, this is golf. This is serious business. I said, no, I'm a flexible guy. I said, no, throw the music on. So we put the music on, crack a beer. I played one of the better rounds of my life. But we pulled up, I'll never forget it, we were on the 6th hole in the green, and the 6th green abuts the 7th tee. And when we pulled up there, maybe it was a little loud, frankly. One of the guys on the 7th tee is one of the kind of the guys that doesn't want any change. As soon as he heard the music, he's like, no, he starts yelling at the top of his lungs, turn that music, this is golf. That was about 6 years ago. You think there's more or less music on the golf course now? I honestly, I love playing music while I'm playing because it takes my mind off the intensity of what we're trying to do. I don't know, but I'm getting off track, sorry.
I have a question on that.
Yes, Michelle.
How do you get people who like, okay, so maybe some people like pop, not really good with golf. Some people like jazz, and some people like other types of music. And it doesn't have to be ear splitting, but how do you get them to be somewhat cognizant of the fact that not everybody wants to listen to your music?
100%.
How does your club deal with that?
It's self-policing. I've said in my group at times, we got to turn the music down. What typically happens, the way we do it, is this, before the pandemic, and we're back to it now, but we all had our own car for a while. We were flying around playing golf in 3 hours. It was crazy. When we had our own cars, everyone put their own speaker on and then turn it down when we get to the green, if you will. Now it's two. No, they're usually open. We have the speakers, but we just, everyone knows how to temper it. And if someone said, like, really, the rule would be, there isn't really a written rule, but if someone, and it happened to me in the club championship of my flight this year, I was leading after day one. It's 36 holes. We played music the whole round, and I had a couple of beers. I had one of my better rounds of my life. Next day, I'm in the lead group, the last group in that second flight. There's 3 of us. I said, would anyone mind if we put music on? One of the guys who's, one stroke behind me. Music. So I said, fine. It's all right. No music. I had a lousy round. He won. Crazy. But we respect it. If someone says, I don't want it, the rule would be done that way. So, Hillcrest needs more capital. The data is very conclusive. I think you're working your way through that knothole. Kudos to you. It's not an easy knothole to work through. I've gone through it a couple of times at my own club, not in the theoretical outsider sense, but in the insider sense. And that capital ultimately needs to be deployed to make the place great for the next generation or two. And that means let's make it fun. That's the bottom line. And let's not worry too much. Let's be innovative. Let's think out of the box. It's necessary in 2020. If you're not thinking out of the box in 2020, you're getting run over by somebody or someone at some point. Thank you.